Hi KPM sir, good evening. We're live now. We'll wait for some time for our viewers to join and then we will start.
Yeah.
So it'll take us around 20 odd seconds to go live. Ghazal, have you gone live? Are you able to see us on the LinkedIn dashboard?
Yes, sir, we're live.
Okay. Somehow I can't see it today. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay, I guess people are joining, so we'll wait for 2 minutes
Yeah,
and
we'll
then
wait.
start. Right, Ghazal, I think we'll start now.
Yes, sir, good time to go.
Okay, hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Colonel Shubhajit Na, founder Protect, and with me today is Colonel KPM Das. Colonel KPM happens to be our Chief Strategy Officer, and he has been in the cybersecurity space for right from the beginning, I will say. Majority of his experience is in system development and security, and in his recent tenure, which is a very long tenure, almost a decade plus, was with Cisco, where he uh, took a formal retirement from Cisco as their national cybersecurity strategy officer. Right. So, welcome, sir. And today we are focusing on a little bit about compliance, how compliance is now evolving and has somehow become challenging, because what has happened over a period of time is the growth of internet and applications and the infrastructure around it has taken a lot of technical people. We are all technically hands-on, but what has now become challenging is because now we are networked and all our assets are networked, our business is networked, our education is networked, uh, our data is at risk. So compliances have started coming in pretty heavily. Uh, in a country like ours, in India, where we were, though compliant in a lot of sectors, we have seen major compliance requirement now coming in by various regulatory bodies like RBI, SEBI, and NCI IPC. So, sir, today we are focusing on mostly how compliance has evolved and what is it, what does it look like now, and what's the future. So, sir, I would like to take your opinion on this. I would love that if you can give a short introduction about yourself, and then we take this talk forward.
Okay, sure. So it's pleasure to be here. Uh, we are discussing something which is extremely topical, which today concerns the government, the regulator, the industry, and if I stretch it further, it even impacts geopolitics. A small thing like non-compliance to a particular regulation can actually break strategic business. Yeah. So I'm KPM Das, and I began my career in cyber about 25 years back, when even cyber was not a term; it was called information warfare. I set up the first information warfare cell for Army, Navy, Air Force. And I was, I did a course in the UK, even while in the Army. Yeah. So over time, there's been truly an evolution. And this evolution is lockstep with the evolution in business itself. So business was analog, business is now digital. IT meant computers. A few years later, IT meant computers and networks. And even few years later, it meant computers, networks, applications. And finally, we are here where actually when you build that ecosystem, which is your IT ecosystem in a company or an enterprise or the government, you have a philosophy that you need to choose. So 15 years back, the philosophy is build what you want. They should perform very well. And then say, okay, throw it over the wall and say, hey, security guys, there'll be one or two people. That's it in a big enterprise. Go wrap it up in a security wrapper. That was the model. And from there, what has happened is today, it is completely flipped on its head. Today, it is security by design, security by default, which means you begin with security and you end with security. So look at the complete transformation, the pivot that has happened in cybersecurity. Significant. So that's one driver. The second driver in compliance has been traditionally businesses were led by business leaders. Very often they didn't even care what tech was. They didn't care what cyber was. And they always had someone called a CIO, Chief Information Officer. The guy knew how to connect computers, etc., but nothing beyond that, right? And then came along this role called CISO, Chief Information Security Officer. Again, not a strategic role at that time. That person would report into the CIO, and the CIO would tell people what is security. Yeah, that has now changed to completely different thing, where CISO is a very key player in the leadership team. I know companies where they are part of the executive leadership. I also know companies where you have a chief risk officer and the CISO reports into that person, because as Subhajit will cover now, it's a lot about risk management. And there's a third model in some of the bigger enterprises where CISO reports into the CFO. Because one little thing, non-compliance, one deviation that you do can completely upset your financials, it can upset your risk. You lose shareholders, your stock will go down, your value goes down, your reputation goes down. So that is it in a broad sense. And Subhajit, over to you to delve into the details.
Right, so thank you for this insight, sir. So what I can gather from your thought is, okay, initially it was, okay, whatever comes, take it, secure it against whatever the threats are. But however, there was no compliance as such. There was no, firstly, regulatory bodies were not looking at that seriously. Now they realize that, okay, everything is public facing, and your actually revenues will get hit if you are exposed. Right, so that's from where the development started. Once I look at the evolution, sir, I will say there was a industry standard which was BS 7799, which was finally adopted as ISO 27001 2013. And when I compare majority of compliances or standards, right, whether by the regulatory bodies or by industry bodies, a majority of them have somehow spun out of ISO 27001 as a base standard. Now, whether you look at NIST CSF 2.0 or you look at NIST SP 853, SP 837, they all follow a framework, I will say, which is underlying is BS British Standard 7799, which now has taken the form of ISO 27001. But what we have seen now in the recent years, in the last 3 to 4 years, where we are talking a lot about resiliency. Now, can you can you throw a little bit of light about how does resiliency come in picture now? Why are we talking about resiliency now in cybersecurity more than okay protective controls and detective controls? We're now saying let's be more resilient. So can you throw some knowledge your knowledge on why is resilience so important in the cyberspace now?
Right. So resilience is co-terminus in evolution with something called zero trust, which we'll come to later. So, there was a time when, you remember I told you about the time when you put a security wrapper, right? You build something, you put a wrapper. You provide a service, you build a wrapper, right? And you keep it to the customer. In those days, what would happen is there was something called a layered defense. Not that we don't have it now, but that time it was only layered defense. So people would put more and more stuff. They buy product A, product B, product C, and kind of wrap it all around. What happened in the bargain is people didn't figure out that security is never absolute, right? You can get close to the absolute. So as a good CISO or I guess good security manager, your job is to take your enterprise or your team as close to absolute as possible. And one of the methods is to be honest and acknowledge that you will be attacked, not once, multiple times. And you're going to have some of your digital assets which actually are more exposed. And which is why when you come to some compliances a little later, you will understand how you manage it. So what actually happens is the evolved state is that you say now, it's not enough to protect. Assuming that you will be attacked, what do you do when you're attacked? So you build inner strength, right? So like you build your muscles, you build your immunity in the human body, you do exactly same for IT system. You build resilience through various measures. We'll cover that later. But what essentially a resilient enterprise does is, even under attack, even under massive denial of service, you find that it has a measured, calibrated, compliant way to get to a resilient enterprise. So your business doesn't get impacted. So your business continues as before. Very often in a good enterprise, which has got a lot of digital platforms, sometimes the customer doesn't even know that the service from the cloud or the data center is actually down in some way, right? Because the resilient architecture takes care of that. Subhajit?
Right, sir. So can we go back to our military days and say, okay, work through jamming? Is it something, relatable to what we used to, so no matter under attack, you still have people, process, technology is defined and engineered in such a manner that you continue working even if enemy is, trying to hamper your ways in which you, carry out your task. Right, sir. So,
Yeah. So,
uh,
go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
yeah. So one of the major things that we have seen is earlier compliance was taken as a checklist. Now it is risk informed, right? So that's what I feel, that today we realize that we have to be continuous. Business cannot get impacted, and that's why from a compliance checklist based, approach, we have now become in a risk informed approach. And once we look at risk informed approach, we know that we need to have ways, means, infrastructure in such a manner that even under attack, we continue to operate without impacting. So, sir, over to you.
So essentially, thanks. So essentially, what happens is that your resilience, you're actually taking into account every little risk, every big risk. You begin by inventorizing them, right? And some of them may seem innocuous, right? Something you say is trivial, it's not likely to happen. But even if it is unlikely to happen, if it happens, it's a massive impact, let's say. So you build a threat model for the enterprise, okay? And this is unique to the enterprise. So working in a pharma company, and you are the CISO and you build a threat model and you're working in a FMCG company, the threat model would be very different. Somewhere you find distribution is more important, for example. Somewhere you'll find your cloud is more important. So you actually build a threat model, and from those threat models you start exploring and discovering points of risk. Yeah, Subhajit?
Sure. Right. So what you were saying, sir, absolutely right. Like what we do is we have done multiple implementations and we have also evolved. We realize that first let's analyze all the risks. So once you've analyzed all the risks, there are some risks, though uh, they might be very uh, their likelihood is very less, but the impact is going to be very, very high, right? And something like ransomware, right? Something like uh, uh, a very rapid failure of your infrastructure. Something like a very strong network outage due to your, say, some regional issue, maybe a earthquake or a kind of a natural disaster or a man-made disaster. So what we have seen is two fundamental uh, standards which are very good for organizations to implement to achieve both preventive controls and achieve resiliency is in my understanding is ISO 27001 gives you that baseline level of controls, and second is ISO 22301, which is business continuity planning. Now what we have seen evolving now in last 3 years is the resiliency related standards, compliance laws. Now EU has come out with a law in itself. So in 2023 EU released DORA, right? Now it's digital, it's something to do with digital resiliency. And now when I go and read the complete act, I realize that what they are saying is not only that your own infrastructure is at risk and can cause very, very grave failures, but your chain of your dependencies, you should know the chain of your dependencies and how they can impact. Now this chain of dependencies, sir, you would have we were having a discussion where we were discussing upon what happened during the CrowdStrike incident. That was a very, very live example of your chain of dependencies, or what you call supply chain risks or third party risks, right? So do you think, sir, that supply chain risks like CrowdStrike will be on rise, or they will be one-off incident? Because such one-off incidents have caused major, major losses. Look at the lawsuit. As of now, Delta has sued CrowdStrike for almost $450 million. So do you see that such things will be on rise, or organizations will evolve and adapt and become more resilient in terms of the software architectures, hardware architectures? Uh, what's your opinion on that, sir?
Yeah. So this is, I mean, we have reached a point where a lot of leadership, security leadership today, is spending a lot of time on supply chain. So 10 years back, supply chain was something no one looked at. It was kind of a black box. Some hardware is shipped, you go and connect it in the network, and then you do the usual procedures, etc. Or if it's a software, remember, cloud wasn't there at that time. It was shipped in a box. You take out that box, mount the CD, and off it goes. Okay, the enterprise application comes up. SAP, for example, was on something like 40 or 50 CDs, right? From there, we are now at a point where everything is turned digital. Internet today is like ether in the universe, which is what you plug in, even to bring hardware alive. Yeah. So if you look at an enterprise, you have two streams of concerns. The first concern is about your hardware, your touch and feel assets, your telephones, all of that stuff, including camera. Everything today is potentially a cybersecurity risk. The second worry that you have is you're carrying applications in your enterprise. Big enterprises have sometimes 100, 200 applications built by different vendors and coming from different sources. Some are homegrown, some are built, etc. Now these applications are all built by people like you and me. We are sitting and writing code. And over time, people have not had the time to pay attention to security, especially software security. So what has happened is, you pick up an operating system, any operating system, or an enterprise application, I can guarantee you 60 to 70% is going to be open source. So what is open source? It's a community of top gun developers who are building for the community and for common use under certain IP legislation. They build these pieces of software which do certain functions. And these functions are reusable. They are in multiple operating systems, a lot of routers, a lot of switches, etc. So you're going back to what Subhajit said about dependencies. You are essentially having a chain of dependencies. And as we all learned in school, the weakest link in the chain makes the whole thing weak. So as someone who's keen to get on top of compliance, the first thing you do is actually identify these links, identify the chains, identify the dependencies, and then build that model, object model, on how each connects to each other, how do they talk to each other, what do they send to each other, and what are from that will evolve the risks that you look at. And believe me, no CISO can address all risks. You have limited capacity, limited people, limited time, limited effort, and most importantly, limited money and limited time. So you prioritize, you say high, medium, low impact, or very high, and so on. And what you're essentially doing, you're triaging your risks. So, Subhajit, that actually is a high-level view.
Right. Thank you, sir. That's a very, very interesting thing that, there might be case in point today in SaaS applications where you are dependent on one SaaS application and it has multiple API dependencies, right? So are you going to track each and every API and ask a vendor to provide me that what are the risks faced by your software on those API? It's going to be a Herculean task, because so that's where probably SBM solutions will probably help us in understanding what are your chain of dependencies. Is my understanding correct, sir?
Yeah, true. So I'll give you an example. We have a compliance in India called Trusted Source, Trusted Product, right? It says that in critical infrastructure, when you go and place hardware or software, you should have first got it compliance, green tick from NSCS. And if you look at the submissions you need to make, it's not very easy, because you need to identify, you pick up a computer or a router, it has the data plane, it has got the control plane, it's got the management plane, and there are some programmable devices there. So you have the CPU and all of that. So you list all that. Where was it made? When was it made? Who's distributing it? Where did you buy it from? Which country? So on and so forth. And SBOM is a little more complex, because the number of software components in an application or in an operating system is hell of a lot. And what is worse, if you pick up code, this is interesting, I've been through this exercise. You pick up code, 64,000 lines, 64 million lines. You will find that there will be holes in the code, functions in the code, which are never ever called, right? So today, regulators and compliance people in the government are getting to say that you need to be very sure what you're using, which version you're using, where did you download it from, what is the risk score of that particular download site, and so on and so forth. So supply chain security by itself is now becoming a full-blown pathway for learning and for professional career as well. Subhajit.
Right, sir. Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So this has been a challenge with our multiple clients, because once we evaluate their security structure, and once they are under compliance like DORA or NIS2, finding that chain is firstly, it's impossible actually at times, because then everybody has to be very very open about their dependencies. That's first requirement, because if my dependency is on a third party software, that third party software's dependency is on another 10 API, which are, say, for them it is dependency. So this chain of dependencies itself is difficult to track. On the SBOM side, sir, I totally agree with you that SBOM is going to be a big challenge, because you need to have library of functions, library of your repositories, library of any open source code which you have incorporated. And in an organization where the controls regarding SDLC are not so rigid, right? And we all are in a habit of making software from wherever it is cheapest, right? Because software is supposed to be functional. So when you go for cheapest and you want to get it as early as possible, probably somewhere down the line quality will suffer. So organizations which are more mature, which have been in the software development space for quite some time, CMMI level 5, companies like Infosys, TCS, they would have had definitely very very streamlined processes, and they will understand this. But in the startup space, or organizations which are much newer in the software development space, do you see this bringing in as a very very critical vulnerability?
Yes, I think yes. For one of the reasons that the time to go to market actually, everything you work backward from the time you want to go to the market, whether it's services, whether it's products. And invariably, most of this is hosted in the cloud. Yeah. And therefore, when you architect your product or whatever, you have to offer, you need to actually have who understand this from a software sense, from a hardware sense, from a supply chain sense, from a risk sense. And the new kid on the block is threat intelligence. So you also need in your team of, let's say, a team of 10, one person who understands and 24/7, 365 is plugged into the threat intelligence ecosystem to see, eyes open, ears open, and respond to those intelligent pieces of intelligence which will come in. And how do you respond? You ensure that you have a platform in your enterprises which can ingest all this intelligence, update all your applications in a manner that it understands that this threat has to be catered for. So this is another big change in cybersecurity. Earlier, it was point-in-time security. So when you got a compliance, you would have a party after that. The team would celebrate. The CEO would give $100 to everybody. That's it. Forget it. Today, it is a continuum. It's so tough that you not only get your compliance the first time, you need to have methods in place to ensure that whatever be the time, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, different compliances have different windows. You need to be ready to do that at that time. Yeah. But I have learned something, in my life, which is you have something like a mother compliance. Let me, for want of what better name, call it mother compliance. And Subhajit will indicate which one it is. If you get hold of that and you immerse yourself in that, the rest of the little things that you have to do, which are in various domains or special areas, becomes much, much easier. Yeah. So the first time you go for a comprehensive, mother compliance, I'll not say what it is, Subhajit will tell you. Then what happens? Things start falling in place. Second thing that happens is it gets into your muscle memory of the enterprise, of the CISO team, to be on top of compliances. I know enterprises where the chief compliance officer is a full-fledged role, because this person's neck is on the line if something goes wrong. Yeah, Subhajit? Your mic is off.
Right. Thanks for this insight, sir. So I've gone through this in last 10 years, in last decade, I've seen this evolution, and I've studied all the regulatory standards and compliances. I feel the simplest one to implement today, if you go to the market, and I will cover your question in within this, Amit Tele. Uh, One of the simplest and easiest one to implement right now is straight away go for ISO 27001. Now, if you look at ISO 27001, it has almost all controls any organization can think of. Almost. I've implemented with the biggest of companies, the smallest of companies. ISO 27001 covers almost 99.99% of the ground. Having said that, it's not mandatory that you stick to those 93 controls in ISO, right? You can add your controls whatever are applicable to you. So it's pretty dynamic. It's pretty it gives you a lot of freedom, degrees of freedom, as we used to call in chemistry. So it gives you a lot of degrees of freedom to take on any control which is required. And to add on with that is ISO 22301, the BCMS. Now, if you follow the BCMS standard 22301, I will say 95% of your compliance tasks are taken on, right? And all you need to do is you need to have a compliance monitoring program, and obviously audits are going to be there. So you need to create a compliance, first implement the controls, have a compliance monitoring program, create a compliance manual, and continuously revisit it, because today the challenges are such that you have to visit continuously. Gone are the days where you just deploy a network firewall and say, oh, our security is done, or we have put an antivirus and we have put a network firewall, our security is done, we don't need anything else, because vectors are generating over a period of time. So my understanding in the complete compliance space, having seen in Europe, APAC region, US and the Americas, and whether it is NIST 853 or NIST CSF 2.0, all compliances ultimately land onto the same controls, right? And therefore, deploying ISO 27001, no matter what, you don't have to get certified. Just take the standard, understand what the standard is, deploy it. I will say regulatorily you are taken care of. Recently, I was going through SEBI CSCRF. I said, all I need to do is deploy ISO 27001 and everything gets taken care of. KPIs, KRIs, my cybersecurity index, what SEBI CSCRF talks about, whether you take RBI CSF, RBI itself says get ISO 27001 certified, SEBI says get 27001 certified. Europe, definitely complete Europe and the UK favors ISO 27001. It's only in the US where we talk about NIST standards and more on your SOC 2, trust criteria services, TCS, as they say, ISO ISA 15408. But ultimately, if you deploy ISO 27001, I feel, sir, everything, more or less everything gets covered. So that's why, in fact, ISO 27001 also takes into consideration BCMS and privacy related controls. Now, what I see in the future, sir, on the horizon is AI. AI is already in, it's not even in the horizon. What is in the horizon is quantum, and AI is already in. How do you think now this is going to play a major role in the compliance sector?
Right. Can you hear me? There's some
Yeah.
drop. Yeah. Okay. See, what is now happening is you are now dealing with data related to security on a massive scale. Okay. Terabyte scale. And you possibly cannot do it through normal tools. You just can't do it. Yeah. Or if you have to do it, then you need to have a super big team with 1,000 people in the SOC. Doesn't work. So the approach is to transform the whole philosophy and therefore the architecture of your SOC, your architecture of, your IT applications, right? Even thing like ServiceNow, for example, which is handling tickets, the entire architecture changes to now factor in automation, okay? So automation is step one. What does automation do? It essentially picks up workflows, business workflows, right? And bring them under a certain logical flow, and then go and write scripts so that all you need to do after that is look at your dashboard and you have all these things coming in through various APIs, connectors, all of that to give you a picture in a manner that you see the priority problems. Yeah. But we have now reached a stage, even automation is not enough. Okay, so we are now transitioning to the next evolution, the next orbit. What has also happened is much of malware today, I think almost 90% of malware, maybe more, is all encrypted. So you go and put a bump in the middle and you have a sensor and you pick out all the data, right? And you parse it, you get zero. You get only garbage. So then attention moves to metadata. Okay? So every packet carries a certain metadata. Streams carry metadata. But there's so much of metadata who tell you a little bit, but they don't tell you everything. Who tells you everything? It is through machine learning. Okay, machine learning, I won't say deep learning, not yet, but machine learning for sure, where you start connecting the dots that are in metadata, apply some rules, heuristics, etc. And then you say, okay, probability 90%, this has to be malware, send it to a sandbox, we'll figure it out. That decision, which used to be all manual at one time, and there were people who were like, heroes in the SOC, okay? We don't probably need as many heroes today. Subhajit?
Right. So what you are saying is you're going to collect a lot of telemetry from the complete layered stack and train the model and do an anomaly detection based on a continuous supervised learning, which is learning from your data, right? So
Yeah.
great insights. I think so. We have crossed our time, and we will now. I will just want to speak a little bit about few questions which we got from our community earlier. Ghazal, can you please throw those questions to us so that we can just quickly take on those questions from our community which were thrown to us? Hi, Ghazal, you there? Can you just, yeah, sure. Thanks.
Yes.
Right. So the first question is, I want to move into leadership public GRC roles, but don't know where to start. Okay. So, but that depends on what your, what your experience has been. So it is definitely important that to move on to leadership roles, you should have done some hands-on work, then graduated into management roles, and it's a pyramidal architecture. So you will probably slowly you have to take it on. So leadership roles are definitely, they come with all the three things: your technical knowledge, your managerial expertise, and of course your qualification and how you fit into the role. So that's probably what I can say about it. To learn how to make and ensure all the right to learn how to make and ensure all departments are compliant. Continuous monitoring, collaborations, those are the things which you have to do to go and ensure that all departments are compliant. And it's not a one-day job; it's going to be a long process. What do you think, sir? What are your observations, or whatever your thought processes on?
Yeah. So essentially, there's something called a security culture in an organization, right? Where there is deep curiosity in this whole area of cybersecurity. So you have rank and file across, somebody is doing a finance function, for example, right? You have to build capacity within all departments of the company. We don't expect a finance executive or accounts executive to be, somebody who understands threats. That's our job. But basic hygiene, cybersecurity hygiene, a number of things that they need to check, that they follow those playbooks which are there for cybersecurity. I think those are crucial. So if I were a CISO today, what I will do is I'll also spend some bit of time and effort in building the whole capacity upward, right? So that the average of that company keeps going up. Yeah. it is not enough to have one person who's a super expert and running around
Yeah.
here. That's not the model. Yeah.
True. True. It has to be a collective effort. It has to be all, like we call in security, shared responsibility model. So it has to be a shared responsibility model, right? So how do you build an approach to automate the compliance and evidence review tasks? Sandeep Yadav, right? Sir, any views on this? Once,
No, so at the bottom of it all, right, there are templated workflows within enterprises. And I've seen enterprises which kind of rely heavily on existing templates. The real challenge is to customize it. Every enterprise is different. And therefore, you customize those workflows, uh, flow of the decision path, the flow of the data path, yeah, all of that. And therefore, you will arrive at something which you have a handle on which way the information is flowing, where does it connect into networks, where are the applications mounted on, all of that stuff. Once you do that, you then have a process to pick up all these in the workflows, those pieces which are crucial, which are time critical, and address them through automation, which are basically through some programmed scripts and functions, right? So you then run those on a periodic basis so that you generate higher level information and you don't get cluttered with too much of noise, right? So to begin with, you need to get your workflows and playbooks in place. Once you do that, then you will get those points, those specific points in that graphic where you actually need to pay attention to automation. You can't automate the whole thing in one go. So you'll automate it in phases.
so sir, this I will take to something called maturity model, right? Uh, the common criteria or the maturity model, Sandeep talks about these 5 levels, right?
Yeah.
Whether you go into software maturity or you go to risk management maturity or you go to compliance maturity. So whenever an organization starts, right, it will be an initial phase. What KPM sir was telling was basically the same thing, that you will, it all depends on where your organization is in anything, whether it's risk management or you're building software or you're making any piece of process, right? So your initiation stage will be at the start, where you have a very small understanding of compliances, which is the state in organizations which are not very old today, right? They will have initial loose attempts at achieving compliance, and you cannot be compliant in one day. The next step is where you go into repeatable processes. So you've gone through 1 year of rigmarole, and second year, what are your decision points, as KPM sir was saying. So you mark out those decision points. So it's very important that you need to have those decision points. Which are those key decision points which will happen, because ultimately compliance is something which revolves around the year, right? So you need to understand those compliance points, and they will become your repeatable processes. Then third year, probably, and in the third year, when you go, you say, okay, I know now, my entire team knows what is going to be repeatable. Now, do I have metrics, or do I have a well defined framework, right, to adopt to? So build a framework. So once you build a framework, and this is where this industry relevant frameworks come into picture. No organization can implement ISO 27001 in first year of its operation. I'm telling you, I myself, being from cybersecurity, I've tried it in my own organization. It has taken us 2 years, because people don't know everything. You onboard people. You are not the only one, right? There are others who need to understand what the processes, workflows are going to be like. So any compliance to reach to a point where you can say that you're at a defined stage will take you third iteration. And that's how all maturity frameworks have been built. So in the third year, you achieve what is called the defined stage, right? You have a framework to adopt to. Then you go and become more optimized. The fourth year is when you become more optimized, because now you know your gap points, your decision points. They're operating in a more seamless manner, and that's where you can bring in software tools, AI tools, and build those compliance. So what I'm trying to say is, it will not happen in one day. It will happen over a period of time. Finally, you will reach the proactive stage, or the final stage, Very organization doesn't need to be looking at what are the compliance. It will be proactively done. It will be embedded into your processes. It will be embedded into your project management, software development, anything, procurement, everywhere it will be embedded, right? So it is all about culture. I hope, Sandeep, good question, Sandeep, and I think that's why it took us much longer time to answer that. Right. The next question is ICSS and OT cybersecurity engineer. I feel stuck in the same role and want to level up. I know the theory but lack exam focused guidance. I'm overwhelmed by too many course options and unclear path. If you are a OT cybersecurity engineer, I take it you are ISO 62443, 62443 certified. Now, probably we'll have to take this question out because today's topic is more on compliance management and compliance, looking at compliance roles. So what we will do is, Ghazal, we can take this question. It's more academic and more career focused, so we will take it later. Security compliance in a startup. Security compliance in a startup is go for NIST CSF 2.0, a very, very simple framework to adopt for a startup, or try to apply ISO 27001 probably in your second or third year of operation. That would be my advice, right? Any other questions? So anything from your side?
No, nothing at all. I wish I was 20 years younger. Next 10 to 15 years is actually the glorious years of cybersecurity. And I'm not joking, I'm being very serious. For those people who are tuned in on the developments, this is one field which is changing very fast. It has to keep pace with the digitalization of the whole world. And therefore, I think you are in the right place. I'm assuming all of you are in cybersecurity. If you're not a worry at all. There is a pathway to get into cybersecurity through courses and certifications and so on. And you will find that there's a graduated ladder by which you can build your career. So unlike 20 years back when you had to be a PhD or an MTech or something like that, not required. You have nice little 80-hour, 100-hour, 120-hour certification courses and so on, which completely bring you up to speed, right? And they actually also have a version, right? So you get on top of that. Thank you.
Right. I think we have crossed our time and we will be taking questions separately, maybe in the next session. Sharath, we've already crossed our time, right? Yes, I can take you. Compliance maturity happens with process maturity, to be frank. And reliance on ML and AI, yes, it will be. We will see slowly. And once your data is there, Sandeep, you will see probably software developers now bringing in more ML and AI into those decision points and making a lot of compliances simpler, because what will happen is over a period of time, from technical compliance point of view, you will have a lot of data points available to you to train your models, right, sir? Thank you so much. We've almost crossed our time. It's almost 50 minutes now. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us and throwing your wisdom into our community. And we all hope that all of you will benefit from this, because this is going to be staying on our platform for the years to come and on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much, sir. Any closing remarks? Right, sir, I think we lost you, or maybe sir has left. Okay, thanks everyone, and see you next time.